In a house in the Salt Lake City suburbs, Grady Edwards dyes his jet black hair brown and shaves off his beard. Then the man removes his brown contact lenses, revealing his blue eyes underneath. Later he carries his luggage to the front door and he heads to the kitchen for some toast and coffee. On the dining table and in the living room are the lifeless bodies of his wife and children, and his calm demeanor implies that he was responsible for their deaths. Eventually the man grabs his bags and drives off. At the Salt Lake City Police Department, Captain Mackey asks Detective Shea if the stepfather Grady Edwards did it. All the cops know about the man is that he was from Kansas and he isn't traceable in any database. Tyler believes Edwards was also responsible for a similar case in New Jersey 3 years ago when a woman and her 3 kids perished from gunshot wounds to the head and the stepfather also disappeared. 6 months later, in a grocery store in Portland, Grady sees Susan dealing with her arguing children Sean and Beth. He politely interrupts and tells the boy to always be nice to his sister, and the mother appreciates his advice. She sees the ring on his finger and says his wife must be very lucky. So Grady lies and says that although he continues wearing it, he lost his wife and daughter in a car accident last year. In the parking lot, Susan approaches Grady and asks if he wants to join them for pizza. She explains that she's recently divorced and she'd welcome the adult conversation. 6 months later, Susan's son Michael arrives home from military school with his girlfriend Kelly. He says he can't believe his mother couldn't come to the airport. So Kelly explains the woman was busy, which is why she offered to pick him up instead. Then Michael asks if she's met his mother's fiancé and she says she's seen him a few times and then he seems alright. Suddenly Kelly opens the back door to reveal that Michael's family and friends are there for a surprise party. Then he hugs his mother, siblings and Aunt Jackie, all of whom he hasn't seen in a year. Eventually Susan introduces her fiancé to her son, who's visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Later the woman asks Jackie and Leah if she's crazy for getting engaged so fast. So the sister assures her that David loves her and everyone thinks they make a great couple. Then the man proposes a toast to thank the family for taking him in and making him feel welcome. Susan tells her fiancé that Jackie was able to get him a job as a real estate agent, which the man appreciates. Moments later, David approaches the son and tells him to meet him in the basement. On his way there, Michael sees that there's a lock outside the basement door. After descending the stairs, he spots newly installed locked cabinets on the wall. Suddenly David appears and explains that he keeps his carpentry tools inside them. Then the man pours them some liquor and says he wants them to be a real family. He adds that he'll talk to Susan and make sure that Michael won't have to return to military school. He says he learned that the son's a great swimmer and encourages him to practice because he could get a college scholarship. That evening Michael asks Kelly if she can give him a ride to the DMV soon so he can get his driver's license. She teases that she'll think about it because she likes how dependent he is on her. Later that night, Susan tells her fiancé that she thinks it's best if her son stays in military school for his senior year. The man tries to explain that the best place for the teen is at home with the family. In his room, the son puts on his headphones so as not to hear the couple's lovemaking. One afternoon, Sean doesn't listen to his mother after she tells him to turn down the volume on the TV. Suddenly David marches into the bedroom, aggressively grabs the boy by the neck and turns the volume down himself. That evening the mother notes Sean's strangely timid behavior. Then the teen learns that the man lost his wife and daughter in a car accident, explaining why he always mentions how important family is to him. Suddenly, Susan's ex-husband Jay arrives to pick Beth and Sean up. David wonders why Michael didn't say hi to his father, but the latter says he doesn't want to. Later the man asks the teen if he wants to have lunch together tomorrow. The next day, the cat-owning neighbor Miss Cutter stops by to talk to Susan. In the kitchen, the woman sneezes because of her cat allergy and tells her fiancé that Miss Cutter said the TV show America's Most Wanted ran a story about a serial killer where they showed a police sketch that looked just like David. The man asks the teen to be his best man at the wedding, and he accepts. Then he says meeting Susan at the grocery store that fateful day changed his life, especially after losing his wife and daughter Michelle. Seconds later, he mentions how it was supposed to be his daughter Lisa's 11th birthday next week, prompting the confused Michael to point out that he thought his daughter's name was Michelle. After work, David sneaks into Miss Cutter's house, throws the elderly woman down the basement stairs and holds his hand over her nose and mouth until she perishes. During dinner, Jay barges into the house and confronts David for grabbing Sean by the neck. The man explains that he had to discipline the child because the father hadn't done a great job. To de-escalate the situation, Michael holds Jay back and picks up the phone he dropped. Outside, the son gives his father back his phone. The latter says he doesn't trust David because they barely know anything about him. Then the man apologizes for everything that's happened in the past year and assures he'll always be there for him. Meanwhile, David apologizes to Sean and promises it'll never happen again. In the bedroom, Susan emphasizes that they never use physical force to discipline children in their family. In the office, Jackie asks the man to fill out the necessary forms and submit a photo ID so they can finally stop paying him under the table, because he can't risk placing his picture onto any kind of database. David tells Susan that he's decided to stop working as a real estate agent, while the woman's out having drinks with friends. Jay stops by hoping to say goodbye to the kids before he heads to the airport. Then David answers a call from Susan, who asks if her ex-husband has arrived at the house yet, and he says no. Suddenly, David knocks the man out with a vase to the head. Because they're busy loudly playing video games upstairs, Michael and Sean ignore the noise. The unhinged man pays the taxi driver and takes Jay and his bags down to the basement. Then he suffocates the father by placing a tight plastic bag over his head. Concurrently, Jackie tells her sister how strange it is that her fiancé quit his job the same day she asked him for details about his life. Later, the man tells Susan that he thinks Michael's upset that Jay never showed, and he apologizes for breaking her crystal vase. Meanwhile, Leah tells Jackie that David always paying in cash whenever they go out to dinner does seem strange. The next day, the man sees police cars outside Miss Cutter's house. From the window, Michael overhears his conversation with the mailman, who says the neighbor had an accident and her niece found her this morning. However, when the teen listens to David relaying the news to the family, he specifically says Miss Cutter fell down the stairs and broke her back. Details the mailman never said. While the couple fills out college applications by the pool, Michael tells Kelly his suspicions about David. He says Miss Cutter ended up dead after telling his mom about the police sketch. Then he included details about the death that the mailman never told him. However, Kelly thinks everything he's saying could just be coincidental. During dinner, Susan asks her son if he's heard from his father. He says the last text message he received was an apology for not stopping by before his flight, but every call since has gone straight to voicemail. When Beth touches David's hand to ask if he's okay, the man envisions the last family he killed sitting around the dining table. That evening, Michael sneaks downstairs to use the computer. To his surprise, the America's Most Wanted website autofills the search bar, and he sees the police sketch Miss Cutter was talking about. The next day, he shows Kelly the printed out sketches, but she still thinks what he's insinuating is a stretch. He adds that he couldn't find any photos of David around the house because he doesn't like to get his picture taken. Michael's girlfriend storms off and heads inside the house. In the kitchen, David says that since they'll be family soon, she can talk to him about any matter involving Michael. Seeing the creepy way he looks at her, Kelly quickly covers up and says she has to go home. In the basement, the man sends a text using Jay's phone saying that he'll call his son back in the next few days. Then he receives a message from Jackie wanting to speak to Jay about David. Suddenly, the phone rings from a call from Michael, and the teen hears the ringing through the vent. He heads downstairs to check the noise, but he finds the man on his phone in the living room, and he realizes that probably explains the ringing he heard. When the teen asks where the key to the basement door is, David says he was wondering the same thing. While the man isn't looking, Michael secretly takes a picture of him using his phone. Later, Susan tells the family that it's looking more likely that the son's staying in Portland for his senior year, and her fiancé responds with a strained look. That evening, the woman says he's taking Beth and Sean to a friend's house who'll be driving them to summer camp tomorrow. After his shower, the teen checks his phone and realizes that someone deleted David's picture. So he heads to Kelly's house and tells her what happened. He adds that the basement door key also went missing, leading him to believe that the man's hiding something down there. That evening, the man intercepts an email from Jackie to Susan where she tells the sister to consider hiring a private investigator to check her fiancé's background, especially since he keeps refusing to give any identification for insurance and payroll to cover his tracks. David deletes the email. Later, he breaks into the woman's home and drowns her in the pool. Eventually, Susan returns home and the man says he just got back from a jog, because the woman complains that she has trouble sleeping when it's stormy outside. The fiancé suggests she ingests sleep medication. Meanwhile, Michael asks Kelly to stay in the car and keep watch because he'll try to break into the basement. The teen grabs a flashlight from the garage and squeezes through a window into the basement. Then he uses a crowbar to open the locked cabinets and finds his father's bag and broken phone. Outside, Kelly sees the living room lights turn on, but when she tries to call Michael's phone, it falls and shatters on the floor. Because he doesn't answer, she decides to try and sneak into the house. To the teen's horror, he discovers his father's body inside the freezer. Concurrently, David catches Kelly looking into the broken basement window and knocks her out. Michael hears the commotion, but the man quickly blocks the exit, locking him in the basement. Eventually, the unhinged killer drags Kelly into the house. The teen bangs on the door and the noise wakes Susan, and she finds her fiancé in the kitchen. He says he thought this was the perfect family for him, but he was wrong. And after seeing the unconscious Kelly, Susan realizes that he's the serial killer Miss Cutter warned her about. The deranged man chases her upstairs and she tries to hide in the bathroom. Michael finally escapes the basement using the crowbar and helps his girlfriend up. As David kicks the bathroom door down, the mirror shatters and Susan grabs a shard. When the man lunges at her with a knife, she swiftly stabs him in the neck with the broken piece of mirror and he falls into the tub. Moments later the trio reunites, but David blocks the stairs, forcing them to flee into the attic. While he tries to fend off the unhinged killer with the crowbar, the teen falls through the rotten boards. So Kelly tries to distract David by threatening him with a bandsaw. However, in the chaos, the mother and the girlfriend fall through the ceiling and back down to the second floor. Seconds later, Michael tackles the man through a window and they end up on the roof. During the scuffle, the teen pushes David off the roof, but when he peeks over the edge, the killer grabs him and they both fall to the ground 2 stories below. 1 month later, Michael wakes up from a coma and learns that the man escaped before the police arrived on the scene. Meanwhile, the deranged murderer now works at a hardware store where he meets a woman who lost her husband 2 years ago. Just as he did with Susan, the man claims his wife and daughter perished in a car accident last year and introduces himself as Chris, implying the unfortunate continuation of his demented search for the perfect family.